Afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from the press. My name is Marthinus van Schalkwyk. I'm the DPR of South Africa to the United Nations. As you know, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2703 on MONUSCO this afternoon. It's the mandate renewal that took place. And we'd just like to make a few comments, and then we would like to hand over to Ambassador Sidi Omar from Frente POLISARIO. So just from South Africa's position on MONUSCO, from the outset, we would like to indicate that we continue to support the efforts of Mr. Staffan de Mistura, who is the personal envoy of the Secretary General on Western Sahara. Also, let me reiterate, South Africa has always and will always support efforts to achieve a just and lasting and mutually acceptable political solution which will provide for the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. It's in this context of ensuring lasting and sustainable peace on the continent that we support the efforts of the people of Western Sahara. And let me hand over to Ambassador Sidi Omar.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you very much, South Africa, for the continuous and principled position of support to the people of Western Sahara and their just struggle for freedom and independence. Today, the Security Council has adopted a new resolution extending the mandate of the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara for another year. In this resolution, as in the previous resolution, the Security Council recalls and reaffirms all its previous resolutions on the issue of Western Sahara and reaffirms its commitment to assist the two parties, the Frente POLISARIO and the occupying state of Morocco, to achieve a just and lasting solution which will provide for the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. The Security Council likewise recognizes the important role played by MONUSCO on the ground and the need for it to fully implement its mission. Moreover, the Security Council recognizes and calls for enhancing cooperation with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, including through facilitating visits to the region, which is a very clear message to the occupying state of Morocco, which has been preventing the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights from visiting the occupied Western Sahara for the 8th consecutive year, as the Secretary General pointed out in his latest report. The Security Council also welcomes the informal consultations convened by the current personal envoy, Mr. Staffan de Mistura, with the two parties, Frente POLISARIO and the occupying state of Morocco, the two neighboring countries, and other states, including permanent members of the Security Council, which shows the international importance being given to the issue of Western Sahara. Nevertheless, the Security Council has missed another opportunity to adopt concrete measures to empower the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, MONUSCO, to fully implement its mandate as established in Security Council Resolution 690 of 1991. The Security Council has also failed to address decisively the long-standing restrictions imposed by the occupying state of Morocco on MONUSCO, which undermine the credibility as well as the international character and impartiality of the mission. The Frente POLISARIO cannot but express once again our rejection of the continued silence by the Security Council and particularly some influential members about the serious consequences of the breaching by the occupying state of Morocco of the 1991 ceasefire on 13th of November 2012. 2020, which jeopardized not only the prospects for relaunching the peace process under the auspices of the personal envoy, but also peace and security in the entire region. In this regard, we express our gratitude to the Russian Federation and to Mozambique for having abstained today, which sends a very strong message to all of those who seek to deviate the peace process in Western Sahara from its unanimously agreed parameters. We also thank all those countries who expressed their support for the right of Sahrawi people to self-determination as the basis for bringing about the decolonization of Western Sahara, the last colony in Africa. Our position remains unchanged. We reiterate our commitment to the achievement of a peaceful, just, and lasting solution to the decolonization of Western Sahara based on the free and democratic exercise by our people of their inalienable right to self-determination and independence. And in this regard, we reaffirm that the United Nations, the Organization of the African Unity Settlement Plan, remains the only agreement mutually accepted by both parties, the Frente POLISARIO and the occupied state of Morocco, and approved unanimously by the Security Council, which established under its authority the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara for a clear and sole mandate. That's the holding of a free and democratic referendum without any military or administrative constraints, whereby the Sahrawi people can decide their future and exercise their inalienable right to self-determination and independence. At the same time, we reiterate our firm rejection of the fait accompli policy, and that the occupying state of Morocco is trying to forcibly impose in the occupied territories of Western Sahara, and we reaffirm the unwavering and firm determination of the Sahrawi people to continue their liberation struggle by all legitimate means to realize our national aspirations for freedom and independence and the establishment of the sovereignty of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic over its entire national territory. Now allow me to reiterate this point, this time in Arabic. تجدد جبهة البوليساريو رفضها القاطع لسياسة الأمر الواقع التي تحاول دولة الاحتلال المغربي فرضها بالقوة في المناطق الصحراوية المحتلة، وتؤكد من جديد تصميم الشعب الصحراوي الثابت والقوي على مواصلة كفاحه التحريري بكل الوسائل المشروعة حتى تحقيق تطلعاته الوطنية في الحرية والاستقلال وبسط السيادة على كامل ربوع الجمهورية العربية الصحراوية الديمقراطية. وإذ يفصلنا يوم واحد فقط عن تاريخ بدء الغزو العسكري المغربي القاشم لبلادنا، فإننا نؤكد بقوة، ولتسمع ذلك دولة الاحتلال المغربي ومن ولاها، أن الشعب الصحراوي وأينما كان سيواصل كفاحه المشروع تحت قيادة ممثله الشرعي والوحيد الجبهة الشعبية لتحرير الساقية الحمراء وادي الذهب من أجل تحقيق أهدافه المقدسة في الحرية والاستقلال وبسط السيادة على كامل ربوع الجمهورية العربية الصحراوية الديمقراطية. Now, if you would allow me, the Moroccan ambassador who spoke before me and took whatever time as part of his habit has made some accusations, which is used to make from here and elsewhere about our national liberation movement, the Frente POLISARIO, using all types of labels, describing us as a separatist group, an armed group, and even a terrorist group. Now, the questions that you, media people, could ask this gentleman who is supposed to represent his country with credibility, decorum, and civility are the following. If what he has been saying all along were true, why did the Secretary General of the United Nations meet with the Secretary General of the Frente POLISARIO and President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic here at the United Nations headquarters on the 11th of September this year in the presence of senior UN officials? Why does the Security Council take note in this resolution, which was adopted today in previous resolutions, of the proposal presented by the Frente POLISARIO to the UN Secretary General on the 10th of April 2007? Why does the personal envoy of the UN Secretary General meet regularly with the representative of the Frente POLISARIO of the United Nations here at the UN headquarters and elsewhere? Why do many states and governments around the world engage officially with the Frente POLISARIO, including, for example, the government of the United States of America, including a visit by a senior US official to meet with the leadership of the Frente POLISARIO early September this year? I could go on and on, but these questions indicate that either the United Nations Secretariat, the Security Council, and many states and governments, including the US government, are supporting separatism, terrorism, and terrorist groups, or the ambassador of the occupant of Morocco has exceeded all limits of tact and common sense. And therefore, he must apologize for his insolent remarks and obnoxious behavior. Another recurring claim made here by the ambassador of the Moroccan occupying state is about the situation in the occupied Western Sahara, where the claim is always that Sahrawis do enjoy full rights and practically live in a paradise, quote unquote, of prosperity and abundance, which is obviously contradicted by the many reports, including the latest report of the UN Secretary General and international and African human rights organizations, which demonstrate that the Sahrawis in occupied Western Sahara continue to be subjected to brutal repression and terror at the hands of the Moroccan security forces, away from the scrutiny by the international community, because Western Sahara remains under a tight military siege and a media blackout. Now, for the sake of argument, let's suppose that the situation in occupied Western Sahara were exactly as the ambassador of the Moroccan occupying state described it. The question is this: why do Moroccan authority to continue to deny the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights access to the territory, as pointed out by the Secretary General of the United Nations in his latest report, let alone rapporteur, NGOs, international media, and observer? The answer is very clear. The occupying state of Morocco has a lot to hide, and it fears that the world would know about the horrific consequences of its illegal occupation of Western Sahara. The ambassador of the occupying state of Morocco talks about increasing support of what he calls their proposal, and then cites figures and arguments, statements. Now, as the Secretary General pointed out in his latest report in July this year, the question of Western Sahara remains on the agenda of the General Assembly and its subsidiary organs. That's the Full Committee and C24 as an issue of decolonization, and on the agenda of the Security Council as an issue relating to peace and security. I think this summarized all, and the occupying state of Morocco can accumulate as many proclamations and political statements as it wants. Now, what is behind all these statements of support? It's an open secret that bribery and corruption are precisely the main tools used by the Moroccan diplomacy in its interaction with other states. And these are exactly the tools that have been used to line the pockets of some corrupt governments to open the so-called consulates, which in fact are some apartments rented for one-day show in the occupied cities of Al-Uyun and Dakhla in occupied Western Sahara. Obviously, the opening of such kiosks is null and void and has no international effect, because Western Sahara remains a non-self-governing territory. Now, we also have Morocco Gate scandal, which is being investigated by the Belgian authorities, and which the investigation have uncovered the deep involvement of the Moroccan regime in bribing and corrupting members of the European Parliament to adopt policies aligned with expansionist policies and occupation of Western Sahara. And no wonder that many members of the European Parliament have been asking that the Moroccan regime be punished for its mafia-like behavior. I think that it's time for the ambassador of the occupying state of Morocco to be concerned about his credibility and that of his country at the United Nations and elsewhere, because all that I have just said begs the question: what credibility can be given to a person who not only makes preposterous accusations, which are indeed an insult to the intelligence of everybody, but also keeps on rehashing the same false claims in the face of hard evidence and common sense? The answer is no credibility at all. I leave it at this. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any questions that you may have.
I'd like you to comment on the last weekend firing of rockets against the city of Sahara. Was it a mistake, or the Polisario is trying to spread the attacks beyond the berm? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Javier. Well, let me say first that it is really interesting that the ambassador of the occupying of Morocco follows our military communiques. He showed you a copy of the latest, 901. He's the same ambassador who, in February 2021, sent a letter to the SG saying that there is no armed conflict in Western Sahara. The answer to your question is the content of our latest military communique, number 901, with the Frente POLISARIO, which has been engaged in an armed liberation struggle against the Moroccan occupying forces since the 13th of November 2020, did target the sector of Sahara, Mahbas, and Farsiya, and it's not the first time. Several times these three sectors, as sectors in Al Sird or Modrega, have been targeted. We are in an open war. The occupying state of Morocco may not want to recognize that, but the fact is there. Since the 30th of November 2020, as a result of the blatant violation by the Moroccan occupying forces of the terms of the ceasefire, the Sahrawi people have been engaged in a liberation war to resist occupation of their land. So the attacks of yesterday, or the day before, or the year before, almost 3 years, are all targeting every position where the occupying forces are. And the objective is very clear, and we make no secret about it. We want to liberate our land from the Moroccan occupation.
Do you regret the death of civilians in these attacks?
We have read in the press, the Moroccan press, and the Moroccan ambassador said that about civilians. But if we want to talk about civilians, in this case, since we talk about the war in Western Sahara, let me just share with you some of the details and information compiled by whom? By the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, and reflected in Secretary General's report. The Secretary General report and MINURSO reports all demonstrate that the occupying state of Morocco has deliberately targeted Sahrawi civilians and assets since November 2020 using lethal weapons, including UAVs, which has callously killed many Sahrawis, civilians. I'm talking about even civilians from other countries, including Algeria and Mauritania. The latest civilians being killed by a Moroccan UAV or drone was on the 25th of October in the area of Gleibat al-Fula. And MINURSO personnel were there yesterday investigating this attack. Let me remind you, as I said before, that in a letter addressed to the SG on the 23rd of February 2021, the ambassador of the Moroccan occupying state to the UN asserted that there was, and I quote, total absence of any armed conflict, unquote. Let me also remind you that according to the UN Secretary General's report of 2022, the occupying state of Morocco claims that, and I quote, has never targeted and will never target civilians, unquote. However, in 2021 and 2022, estimates indicate that 24 civilians, including a 15-year-old boy, have been killed and 12 wounded by Moroccan UAVs, air strikes. 26 civilians, cars, and heavy trucks have also been destroyed between 2021 and 2022. Now, the SG report of 2022 mentions an aerial strike that took place early November 2021 in Bir Lihlu area involving 2 Algerian trucks, which resulted in the death of 3 Algerian civilians caused by the explosion of an air-to-ground munition and the resulting fire. Other aerial strikes, and we always talk about, in these cases, as reported in this report, air-to-ground munition involving civilians that took place in the Mijik area. All these are in the liberated territories of the Sahara Republic, and one of them took place even in the vicinity of Minurso team site in Agouenit. According to the SG report of this year, on the 3rd of November, a Minurso investigating team visited a site of an aerial attack in Mijik area in the liberated territories of the Sahara Republic, where it observed the charred remains of 5 individuals and 1 destroyed vehicle. On the 30th of January 2023, a Minurso investigation team visited the site of an aerial strike that occurred on the 12th of January in Tifarit area in the liberated territory of the Sahara Republic and observed the remains of 1 individual and 1 destroyed vehicle. On the 1st of February this year, a Minurso investigation team visited the site of an aerial strike in Bir Lihlu in the liberated territories of the Sahara Republic and observed the remains of 3 individuals alongside 1 destroyed vehicle. 1 Mauritanian mining permit and identity card was found at the scene. Now, if there is no armed conflict in Western Sahara and the Moroccan occupying forces do not target civilians, the ambassador of the Moroccan occupying state did not talk about any civilians in whatever way, as they claim. So why does the UN Secretary General state in his observations and recommendations of this year, and I quote, it also remains essential that the Royal Moroccan Army, that's the occupying Moroccan forces, refrain from conducting military activities that have an impact on civilians and directly or indirectly affect Minurso operations east of the Berm, that's the liberated territories of Western Sahara. These are the facts reflected not by me or the Frente POLISARIO, by the Secretary General. The occupying state of Morocco have been targeting deliberately civilians using lethal weapons, including UAVs, to callously kill Sahrawi civilians and even civilians from neighboring countries, including Algerians and Mauritanians. These are the facts. I'm not talking about what Moroccan media reports, because their credibility is at the same level of the credibility of their representative at the United Nations, which I have just shown what kind of credibility is that.
So, last question. I understand that you have the same right to retaliate with the same civilian targets.
The Frente POLISARIO, and based on its values and full compliance with the rules of international humanitarian law, has never targeted any civilians in its war of liberation against Morocco. Its decades-long record attests to this, and we challenge anyone to prove the contrary. I think everybody knows that our liberation struggle has always been engaged in on the basis of resisting illegal occupation of our land. We have never targeted any civilians, but who is targeting civilians is the one that the Secretary General is talking about. And I invite all of you to read Secretary General's report to know exactly who is targeting Sahrawi civilians and civilians from neighboring states, including, as I said, Algeria and Mauritania. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Ambassador. All the best.